Ravalli County, Montana, September 11th, 1923, 7 in the morning. The light in the Bitterroot Valley in early September comes from the east over the Sapphire Range and lies flat across the benchland before it reaches the river. And a woman standing in a field at 7 in the morning with a drawing board under her arm and the grass still wet from the night would have had perhaps 2 hours of that light before it climbed above the cottonwoods and made the shadows wrong for detail work. Eleanor Marsh knew this. She had been drawing in the Bitterroot for 11 years. The mountains, the river oxbows, the way the light behaved on the alluvial fans below the western slope. And she understood what the morning hours in September gave a draftsman that no other hour could provide. She had come out early specifically for the light. She had not expected what was in the field. She was 34 years old. She taught drawing and penmanship at the Stevensville Consolidated School, 3 miles north of where she was standing, and she had been in that position since 1912, when she had arrived from Missoula with a certificate from the Montana State Normal School and a portable drawing kit that she carried everywhere. She was not a famous artist. She was a teacher who drew well, which in a small valley school in 1923 made her the only person within 20 miles who could do what she was about to do. Look at something no one had ever seen, understand what she was seeing, and put it on paper with enough precision that someone who hadn't been there would know exactly what it looked like. She had come to the Beaumont farm that morning because the Beaumont family's youngest son, a 16-year-old named Roy, had knocked on her door the evening before and told her that something had been found on the north end of their property during fence post digging. Roy Beaumont said his father thought it was Indian work, but didn't know what kind, and that it was strange enough that he'd stopped the digging and left everything where it was. He had asked Roy to find someone who could draw it before they decided what to do with it.
Roy had gone to Eleanor Marsh because Roy had been in her drawing class for 2 years, and because even a 16-year-old in Stevensville in 1923 understood that Eleanor Marsh was the person you called when you needed something recorded accurately. What she found in the north field of the Beaumont farm was not Indian work in any form she had encountered in 11 years of living in the Bitterroot Valley. But here is what the United States Army and the Bureau of American Ethnology have spent 102 years making sure you never ask about. The Bitterroot Valley runs north to south for approximately 80 miles between the Bitterroot Range to the west and the Sapphire Range to the east, drained by the Bitterroot River and its tributaries. Ravalli County occupies the southern 2/3 of the valley and the mountain terrain on both flanks.
In 1923, it was ranch and farm country. The alluvial benchland along the river divided into homestead parcels, the higher ground running cattle, the mountain slopes under timber lease or left to the Bitterroot National Forest. The Flathead people had occupied the valley for centuries before the Jesuits established St. Mary's Mission at Stevensville in 1841, and the physical evidence of pre-contact occupation was common in the benchland: fire rings, middens, the occasional burial mound eroded by the river. The county's residents were accustomed to finding such things, and the protocol in 1923 was informal. You noted it, you left it alone, and if it seemed significant, you contacted the county agent or the Forest Service and waited for someone with more authority to tell you what to do. What was in the Beaumont field did not fit that protocol. The north field was a flat bench, approximately 4 acres in area, bounded on the north by a dry coulee and on the east by the county road. Ward Beaumont, 61 years old, had been fencing it for sheep pasture and had put his hired hand and Roy to work sinking posts along the northern edge the previous morning. At the 3rd post position, Roy's bar had struck flat stone at 14 inches below the surface. Not a random rock, a worked slab, smooth on the upper face, cut to a rectangular form approximately 3 feet by 2 feet. They pried it up and found it was a capstone. Below it, a shaft approximately 18 inches square went straight down into the earth for a depth that Roy, lowering a weighted string, measured at 6 feet before it bottomed on a second flat slab. The shaft was not a natural formation. The walls were faced with flat stones set without mortar in a coursed pattern, horizontal rows, each stone fitted to the next with a precision that Roy described to Eleanor Marsh as better than the stonework on the County Road Bridge. Ward Beaumont had looked at it for a long time, and then told Roy to cover it with a canvas and leave it until morning. Eleanor Marsh was standing at the edge of the shaft at 7:15 in the morning of September 11th, 1923. She looked at it. Then she opened her drawing kit. She worked for 2 hours on the first morning. She made 4 drawings. The first was a plan view sketch of the shaft opening and the surrounding ground, showing the dimensions of the capstone, its relationship to the post hole excavation, and the orientation of the long axis relative to true north, which she established with a compass she carried in her kit.
The long axis of the capstone ran 4 degrees east of true north. She noted this because she had been told in her normal school training that orientation was among the first things to establish for any archaeological context, and because 4 degrees east of true north meant the shaft had been aligned deliberately rather than placed at convenience. The second drawing was a sectional view of the shaft, showing the coursed stonework on the walls, the depth to the bottom slab, and the dimensions of the void at each level. The third and fourth drawings were details, close studies of the coursework on the north and east walls, showing the individual stones and the fitted joints between them. She came back the next morning with Roy Beaumont and his father and drew 4 more. The fifth drawing was the bottom slab, which Ward Beaumont had not disturbed, but which Roy had lifted slightly on one edge with a pry bar at his father's direction to see if there was anything below it. Below it was a cavity approximately 6 inches deep containing 3 objects. Ward had put the slab back without removing them. Eleanor Marsh drew the cavity as Roy described it, the 3 objects in their positions, the dimensions of the cavity, the material of the objects, as best Roy could characterize them. Dark, smooth, regular in form, each approximately the size and shape of a man's thumb. She drew what she could see through the gap when Roy lifted the edge of the slab again, the smooth, dark surface of what appeared to be worked stone or ceramic. No visible tool marks, no decoration she could identify.
The sixth drawing was a detail of the shaft entrance and the underside of the capstone, which carried a pattern of incised lines along its inner face, a series of parallel marks running perpendicular to the long axis, consistent in spacing and depth, that she copied with the same precision she brought to all her work. The seventh drawing was an overall site map showing the north field, the dry coulee, the county road, the post hole line, and the position of the shaft relative to all of them. The eighth was a second detail of the coursework, from the west wall this time, because the morning light on September 12th came at a different angle than September 11th, and she could see things in the joints that the first drawing had not captured. 8 drawings in 2 days. She worked with a hard graphite pencil on Bristol board, the kind of paper she used for fine penmanship exercises, and her drafting hand was steady and exact. The drawings were not artistic interpretations. They were technical records, the same registers she used when she taught her students to copy architectural ornaments or to render mechanical forms. She understood what she was making. She was making the document that would exist if no other document did. On the afternoon of September 12th, Ward Beaumont rode to the county agent's office in Hamilton and reported the find. The county agent contacted the Flathead Agency at Dixon, which had administrative authority over matters relating to Native American cultural sites in Ravalli County. The Flathead Agency contacted the Bureau of American Ethnology. This sequence, from county agent to federal bureau, took 4 days. On September 16th, 2 men arrived at the Beaumont farm. They were not bureau representatives. They were United States Army, in uniform, driving a government vehicle. They were accompanied by a civilian in a suit who introduced himself as an agent of the Bureau of American Ethnology, but did not give his name. Ward Beaumont met them at the gate. He told them what had been found and where. He did not tell them about Eleanor Marsh or the drawings. Eleanor Marsh was not on the property that day. She'd gone back to Stevensville on the afternoon of September 12th with her 8 drawings, her field notes, and the dimensional records she had made over 2 mornings, and she had not yet returned.
Ward Beaumont did not think to mention her. The Army men spent the better part of a day at the shaft. They lowered a lamp. They removed the 3 objects from the cavity below the bottom slab. The civilian made written notes. At the end of the day, they directed Roy Beaumont, who had been watching from a distance, to fill the shaft. Roy filled it.
The Army men and the civilian loaded something into the back of the government vehicle. The civilian asked Ward Beaumont whether anyone else had been at the site. Ward Beaumont said a neighbor had looked at it. The civilian asked the neighbor's name. Ward Beaumont said he didn't recall. The following morning, before school, Roy Beaumont rode his horse the 3 miles to Eleanor Marsh's house on the south edge of Stevensville and told her what had happened. She listened. She went inside and looked at the 8 drawings laid out on her kitchen table. She picked up the drawing of the incised marks on the underside of the capstone and looked at it for a long time. Then she took the drawing of the incised marks and slid it between the pages of a geography textbook on the shelf, the one she used for the 3rd form class, a thick volume with a green cloth cover, and put the other 7 drawings in the folder she kept for finished student work, underneath the 3rd-year penmanship portfolios at the bottom of the stack. She was not hiding them. She was filing them where a person coming to look at drawings would not immediately find them. There is a difference. She told Roy to tell his father that she had been at the site 2 days before the Army came, and that she had made drawings and that the drawings were safe. Roy told his father. Ward Beaumont did not contact the Army or the Bureau. He had been asked if anyone else had been at the site. He had said he didn't recall. He stayed with that answer. The Bureau of American Ethnology's field correspondence files for the autumn of 1923 do not contain any record of an operation in Ravalli County, Montana. The Flathead Agency's administrative files for 1923, held at the National Archives Pacific Alaska region in Seattle, contain a 1-line entry in the correspondence log for September 1923. Notification forwarded to Bureau of American Ethnology, Site Report, Beaumont Property, Ravalli County. There is no file for the site report itself. There is no record of a response from the Bureau. There is no record of any Army involvement. The Army does not operate under the Bureau of American Ethnology's administrative authority, and no mechanism existed in 1923 for the Bureau to direct Army personnel to a site inspection. The 2 men in uniform at the Beaumont farm on September 16, 1923, were not there because the Bureau sent them. They were there because someone with authority over both a federal civilian bureau and a military unit made a decision that the Beaumont farm find warranted a response that went beyond a civilian administrator. And they made that decision within 4 days of Ward Beaumont's report to the county agent. 4 days. Discovery reported on September 12th. Army on the property on September 16th. The distance from Hamilton, Montana to Washington, D.C. is 2,200 miles. A telegram sent September 12th, a decision made September 13th, travel arranged September 14th, arrival September 16th. That sequence works, but it works only if the decision to send uniformed Army personnel to a fence post dig on a ranch in Ravalli County, Montana, was made by someone at a level of authority that commanded both a civilian bureau and a military transport, and made it in under 24 hours of notification, and made it without creating a paper trail in the Bureau's own correspondence files. The shaft in the Beaumont field was not the first anomalous structure found in the Bitterroot Valley in the decade before Eleanor Marsh made her drawings.
In August 1914, a road crew grading the county road along the eastern benchland found the edge of a stone-lined chamber at a depth of 3 feet during a cut through a low mound. The chamber was described in the road crew foreman's work log, a document maintained for the Ravalli County Roads Department, as approximately 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, and containing remains. The foreman, a man named Otto Berglund, 47 years old, noted the find and drove to Hamilton to report it. When he returned the following morning with the county road superintendent, the chamber had been covered. The earth above it was freshly turned. No one had been authorized to do that work. Berglund noted the discrepancy in his log. The Roads Department's log for 1914 is in the Ravalli County Historical Archive. Berglund's entry is there. The chamber is not. Neither is any record of who covered it, or on whose authority. 6 years before Eleanor Marsh stood at the edge of the Beaumont shaft, a woman named Clara Svensson, 62 years old, who had lived in the Bitterroot Valley since 1881, and whose homestead sat half a mile from the dry coulee bounding the Beaumont North Field, told her daughter in a letter that she had seen, as a young woman in the early 1880s, men working at night on the benchland north of what would become the Beaumont property.
She had not understood at the time what they were doing. She understood in retrospect that they had been removing things from the ground. She did not know who the men were. She knew they were not ranchers and not Flathead. She wrote this to her daughter in 1917 and told her not to show the letter to anyone in the valley. The daughter kept the letter. It is in a private family collection in Missoula. What was in the shaft is answerable by what was in the shaft, according to Roy Beaumont, who watched the army men remove it. 3 dark objects, each approximately the size and shape of a man's thumb, smooth, regular, and made from a material he could not identify because he had never seen it before. What the shaft itself represents, a stone-lined, oriented, capped structure at 14 inches below a benchland surface in a geological context that predates any known construction technology in the Bitterroot Valley, is answerable only by the framework that the official record refuses to apply. The construction method is the primary evidence. The coursed dry stone facing on the shaft walls, as Eleanor Marsh drew it across 6 studies over 2 mornings, shows a fitting precision inconsistent with any construction practice the official timeline assigns to any population in the pre-contact Bitterroot Valley. Flathead construction used earth and timber. The coursework Marsh drew was stone, horizontal, fitted without mortar, each stone selected and placed to bear evenly on the course below and seat the course above. This is a technique requiring either a long tradition of stone construction, one that produced generations of craftsmen who could fit stone to stone without binding agent, or a forming technology that allowed the stones to be cut to fit. No lithic tradition producing this class of construction has ever been documented for any pre-contact population in the interior Pacific Northwest. The capstone's incised marks on its inner face, as drawn by Marsh in her 6th study, describe a pattern of parallel lines at consistent depth and spacing that matches, in general character, the marks Thomas Cade described on the ceiling of the Alderson Farm Chamber in Fayette County 44 years earlier. Though Marsh had no knowledge of the West Virginia find, and Cade's notebook had not been published in any accessible form. 2 independent observers, 2 decades apart, 2,000 miles apart, describing the same class of constructed mark on the inner stone surfaces of sealed subterranean structures. The pattern does not require a shared origin to be significant. It requires only that the structures are related by the same building tradition. They are. The Tartarian hypothesis, applied to the Bitterroot Valley find, proposes a civilization with the architectural and technical capacity to construct oriented, stone-lined underground chambers across the breadth of the North American continent, whose presence in the archaeological record was systematically removed beginning in the 1870s and continuing through at least the 1920s. The Beaumont shaft is one data point. The Berglund road cut chamber is another. Clara Svensson's letter from 1917 describes the removal operation in the 1880s, before the pattern had been fully established. The sequence, construction, concealment in the geological record, rediscovery by working people, rapid federal response, removal without documentation, runs identically in Montana in 1923 as it runs in West Virginia in 1879 and in Fayette County in 1887. The geography changes, the institution and the sequence do not. The global parallel is the dolmen field at Rujum El Hiri in the Golan Heights. where thousands of stone-lined burial and ritual structures, many of them oriented to astronomical events, all of them built with coursed dry stone construction, were built at a date the official record assigns to a pre-literate pastoral population that has left no other evidence of architectural capacity at this level of precision. The Rujum El Hiri site was not suppressed.
It was too large and too exposed to suppress. The Beaumont shaft was not. One shaft on a ranch in Montana in 1923 could be filled in a day by a 16-year-old with a shovel. The Beaumont farm parcels in Ravalli County were sold out of the family in 1962, following Ward Beaumont's death. The Northfield, the 4-acre bench where the shaft was found, is now part of a larger consolidated ranch holding managed by Bitterroot Valley Agricultural LLC, incorporated in Delaware, registered agent in Wilmington, no agricultural activity or revenue on file with the Montana Secretary of State since its acquisition of the parcel in 1978. The LLC holds 31 acres in Ravalli County, the North Beaumont Bench, the adjacent dry coulee, and a strip of benchland running north to the next property boundary. It holds them without planting, without grazing, without any recorded commercial purpose. The annual property tax on 31 acres of Ravalli County benchland is not a large number.
Someone has been paying it for 47 years to ensure that the ground above the filled shaft remains in private hands, not accessible to the Montana State Historic Preservation Office's survey programs, which apply only to publicly held land. A Freedom of Information request filed in April 2020 by the independent researcher Gordon Ashby, requesting all Bureau of American Ethnology correspondence and field records related to Ravalli County, Montana, for the period 1920 through 1930, produced 4 pages. 3 were existing published reports on Flathead cultural practices that had nothing to do with Ravalli County. 1 was a cover letter noting that field records from this period were incompletely preserved and that a comprehensive search could not be guaranteed. The Army records that would document the September 1923 visit to the Beaumont farm fall under the Army's own records management system, not the Bureau's. A separate request to the National Archives for Army field orders and travel records from the 9th Corps area, which had administrative authority over Montana in 1923, for the period September through October 1923, produced no responsive documents. The 9th Corps area's records for this period were transferred from the Presidio of San Francisco to a federal records center in 1962, and subsequently consolidated with other Pacific Coast records.
The Consolidation Inventory lists the September 1923 operational files as transferred. The Receiving Facilities Inventory does not list them as received. The gap is noted in the Consolidation Manifest. No corrective action was taken. Eleanor Marsh taught drawing and penmanship at the Stevensville Consolidated School until 1951, when she retired at the age of 62. She never showed the drawings to anyone outside the school building during the years she taught. She kept the geography textbook with the hidden drawing of the capstone marks on the classroom shelf from 1923 until her retirement, at which point she took it home with her. She kept it with the other 7 drawings in a folder in her parlor in Stevensville. When she died in 1967, her estate passed to her nephew, Daniel Marsh of Missoula, who was not aware of any particular significance attached to a folder of pencil drawings in his aunt's parlor.
He kept the folder with the rest of her papers in a cardboard box in his home, and when he died in 1984, his wife donated Eleanor Marsh's papers to the Ravalli County Museum in Hamilton, where they were accessioned under Marsh, Eleanor, Teaching Materials and Personal Papers, 1912 to 1967. The folder is listed in the finding aid. 8 drawings, graphite on Bristol board, September 1923, labeled in Marsh's hand, Beaumont North Field, shaft and contents.
The finding aid notes the drawings as being of an unidentified archaeological site. No researcher has requested the drawings since they were accessioned. They have been in the Ravalli County Museum for 40 years. The drawing tucked into the geography textbook, the one she slid between the pages the morning after Roy Beaumont came to her door, is listed as the 9th item in the folder. She put it back with the others before she retired. She had kept it separate for 28 years, and then she put it back because she was 62 years old and she had decided that whatever was going to happen with what she had drawn had to be decided by someone other than a retired drawing teacher in Stevensville, Montana. Eleanor Marsh, 34 years old. September 11th, 1923.
The light came over the sapphire range and lay flat across the benchland, the way she knew it would, the way she had watched it come for 11 years. And she stood at the edge of the shaft with her drawing board under her arm and the compass in her hand. And she looked at what Ward Beaumont's son had found, and she opened her drawing kit. She had 2 days. She used both of them. She made 8 drawings that are still in a folder in Hamilton, Montana, waiting in the same flat light she drew them in, which is the light that the mountains make when the sun is low and the shadows show every joint and every fitted stone exactly as it was placed, by whoever placed it, before anyone in the official record had arrived in the Bitterroot Valley, to say whether what was there was possible or not. What was possible and what was not is answered by the drawings. The drawings are in Hamilton. The shaft is filled. The 3 objects are in Washington, in a catalog that does not list them, received by a bureau whose records for Ravalli County in 1923 show nothing.
The well digger who measured before they arrived worked 3 states and 44 years earlier. He kept a second notebook. Eleanor Marsh kept a 9th drawing. The mechanism does not change because the profession changes. It does not change because the decade changes. It does not change because the geography changes. The only thing that changes is the name on the folder in the finding aid.